Greetings, Earthlings! Before we start exploring, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, wherever you're listening. It helps more people find the show and supports our mission of making science accessible to everyone. You're here with DJ Stellar Cloud. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome back to the Exploring Your Universe radio show. Exploring Your Universe is UCLA and LA County's largest free science fair. You're listening to DJ Stellar Cloud and
DJ Snowball Garnet.
DJ Snowball Garnet, aka Kevin Coffey, is a lecturer in the EPSS department, that's Earth, Planetary, and Space Sciences. So if you knew what EPSS stood for, you were probably in one of his classes. But he has a very long history at UCLA and at EYU, which we're so excited to hear about. And I just heard that he's been to 5 or 6 EYUs before.
That's right. I started going way back in grad school, and I've been a fan ever since.
Yeah, so you went to UCLA for undergrad and then grad school, and then now you're still here working here. So you've attended EYU in a number of different ways. Any favorites that stand out?
Oh, they've all been so good, and they've been great in different ways as I've been doing different roles or covering different topics. Probably, though, my first one is still my favorite. My friend and I had just started a geology club, Bruin Geological Survey.
Oh, they're still around.
They're still around. They're back now. Yeah,
they're
very
back.
exciting. It's so glad to see it. And there wasn't anybody doing a rock room, and so we thought that was very much
funny.
our job to do. And so we put together, kind of last minute, we put together a whole rock room with all kinds of interactive exhibits and activities, and it was a real grand old time.
That's kind of crazy because not only has BGS now expanded, now they have trips, but the rock rooms at EYU have also expanded. Now we have 3 or 4 different, what I would call rock rooms. Because we've got Solgi's lab, I would count the Meteorite Gallery as a rock room. But yeah, there's also Rocks of Southern California. And I would say that you were the trendsetter for all of these. What did EYU look like when you first founded the rock room booth?
EYU was a fantastic event already, but a lot smaller in total size and also in the number of departments and thus the number of disciplines that were involved. And we had a really good showing already in the department, and there was a big mineral booth, so rock adjacent.
Oh, yes,
and,
rock adjacent.
Yeah, and a good fossil exhibit, and I think a big meteorite thing already. And but we noticed there was nobody doing the rocks themselves, and so that was a really delightful thing to add. And we were in there late at night putting out all our little labels and figuring out how to arrange everything. And it's been fantastic to see it just grow and grow since.
Yeah, just a fun fact, I was stalking you in the EYU spreadsheets last night, and when you were volunteering in 2018 for the rock room, there was only 35 booths, and last year we passed 70, so we've actually doubled in size over the last 7 years, and I'm hoping to double in size again before I graduate, which is a little ambitious. For our listeners at home, could you briefly describe the difference between a rock and a mineral?
Sure, absolutely. And congratulations, by the way. I love to see how it's taken off.
Oh, yeah. Credit to Abijah. I didn't do any of it.
That's fair. Yeah, congrats to you both. So minerals are the building blocks of rocks. Mm-hmm. So a rock is made of one or more different types of minerals. Mm-hmm. If you look at a granite countertop or something and you see all the little pinks and grays and whites and so on, each one of those is a different kind of mineral that you're seeing in there. They're aggregated together to make the rock.
Very, very cool. You just taught me a lot about rocks and minerals. What kinds of things were people learning at the rock booth?
So we walked them through the different kinds of rocks and the rock cycle.
Mm-hmm.
That's a classic kind of elementary school thing, but there's a lot to it where when you cool down lava, you get a brand new rock. We call that an igneous rock, and we took them through these different kinds based on what the different things are in the lava, what different chemistries, how it erupts, how it cools down, all influences the kind of rock you get. And that's related to all these great processes, volcanoes and lava flows and eruptions and magma chambers deep underground and geothermal energy and cool stuff like that. And then once you've got one of those rocks, an igneous rock or any rock at the surface, the rain and the wind and the elements and all that gradually will wear that down, and you get sediment like sand at the beach. And that can end up aggregated back together into a whole new rock, a sedimentary rock. And
that's when you get the cool layers like a sandwich.
Exactly, the layer cakes that we see, with each layer above younger coming later than the one below, and you can it's like reading the pages of a history textbook. The pages of the earth, the history of the earth are written in these layers. And then if you bury any of these deep enough and you put them under enough pressure and enough temperature, you cook them, you metamorphose them, we call it, and you get a new metamorphic rock. So we walked people through all of that, and we also wanted to show people kind of why they might care. So we had all of these things that are made from rocks, and they could match the everyday item, the stick of chalk or whatever, with the natural rock that it's made from.
What was your favorite kind of rock that you had at the booth, if you remember?
Oh, it's hard to say, but I think it really was fun. We had kind of a natural chalkboard going. We had a piece of slate, which is what a chalkboard is made out of, and a natural piece of chalk. And students could take these two just hunks of rock and write out messages with them. And so that was a lot of fun.
Oh, that does sound really fun. So what I've noticed from, recording these podcasts for a few months now is that every kid's favorite thing at a booth is when they can destroy something. And so, writing the chalk is, kind of destroying the rocks. They're like, I'm going to wear down this rock until Kevin has to replace the rock.
It's true. At least that one was intended to get used up. Yeah, we had, I remember towards the end, a rather fragile rock. It's called coquina. It's basically like a Rice Krispies treat, except instead of Rice Krispies, it's all these little shell fragments.
Oh, of animals?
Yeah, just all these little broken seashell bits just kind of loosely glued together. It's a really neat texture and a really pretty rock, but also sort of fragile. And when Kid had to go with that towards the end, so it goes.
Oh, there she is. Our cat has decided to join us. I think she recognized your voice or something, and she was like, I actually know that guy, I can hang out with him. She doesn't normally come out when we have guests over.
Oh, well, what a compliment.
Yeah.
Hello there.
Anyway, another very cool rock, or what I'm assuming is a very cool rock, is a snowball garnet. You want to take a few seconds and tell us what that is?
Sure, I'd be delighted. So a garnet is this metamorphic mineral, actually, one of the ones that'll form when something's buried deep inside the earth. You'll start to grow these garnets. And a lot of people know them as gemstones. I think it's January.
January.
Yeah. And so they do this fascinating thing where they grow within an existing rock.
Oh, like a parasite.
That's a little bit. Yeah, they grow at the expense as other minerals break down.
Yeah.
And so as they grow, they can actually grow around and include little bits within of the surrounding rock, almost like bubbles of air and ice.
Okay.
This new growing mineral grabs these little bits. And if the rock is actually under the right kind of pressure, the forces are in the right direction, the whole rock can be deforming or shearing or kind of sliding and changing its shape. And that can actually cause this round garnet to roll or to rotate, if you imagine. Yeah, imagine like grabbing a ball between your two hands, and your hands are like some of the layers of the rock, and then if the layers are sliding past each other, you grab the ball and you move your hands in opposite directions, and the ball in your hands will start to spin or to rotate.
Yeah.
So these garnets will actually rotate as they grow.
Oh.
And you can see it in the pattern. They end up with these beautiful spiral patterns you can see under the microscope. It's called a snowball garnet because it's like when you roll a snowball, the layer of snow is flat, but as you roll the snowball across it, you pick up layer after layer and you spiral them up, into this ball shape. So the garnet is sort of picking up layer after layer of rock and spiraling it around as it spins. So they're really cool textures, and they tell you some really interesting stuff about what the rock was doing as it formed, and that can be tied to whole mountain range scale kind of rock movement events and plate tectonic events. One of our old professors, former professors, John Rosenfeld, was an expert on that. So I learned about it from him as an undergraduate. Took it as my radio name when I went and did field mapping, and everyone had a walkie-talkie.
Oh, so you've been DJ Snowball Garnet since before today.
I have. This was a callback. Yeah, that was my old call sign. Yeah, as an undergrad at field camp.
That's very cool. I'm wondering if this process is specific to garnets, or does it happen with other gemstones?
That's a great question. The snowball garnet phenomenon is largely a garnet kind of thing. They grow so much and quickly enough and around the stuff around them. But the idea of new minerals forming and growing around other things applies to all kinds of different minerals and different situations, and can tell you really cool things. Some of our researchers in the department have been looking at these zircon crystals.
I have seen them on Sarah Preston's Instagram, like every day.
Yes, she has been taking tons of zircons out of her samples. I think she's up to 11,000 now and getting ready to analyze them. So they're a great mineral because they're one of the minerals you can figure out the age of by measuring them.
Okay.
And so you can date rocks, figure out how old a rock is from them. And they're also the oldest pieces of the earth that we've ever found are these little crystals of zircon. The rock even is gone, but the crystals are still there from way back in what we call the Hadean, the really kind of early starting days of the earth.
Oh, the Hades, the hell era.
Exactly, yes. Magma oceans and whatnot. But as we're learning now, potentially not as hellish for as long as we thought. And part of that's been by looking at inclusions in these zircon crystals of other things that can tell you something about, whether there might have been liquid water or what was going on with carbon on the earth at the time and so on. And so people look at little fragments of diamond or graphite within a zircon to say something about carbon on the early earth and maybe if there even might have been life already and, things like that. So the idea of one mineral growing around and preserving something else is a widespread phenomenon.
That's very interesting. I didn't realize gemstones were for more than jewelry. I'm kidding, by the way. I genuinely am in this geology department, I promise. I don't know very much about geology, but I do walk around the building, and there are very many pretty rocks, and now I'm learning minerals. Okay, so you're running Rock Room, and then you graduated grad school, you became a doctor, you became Dr. Snowball Garnet, and then you were something else at EYU during the pandemic?
Yes, I served as a panelist for the first time, which was a delightful new role to play.
Yeah, it's a new role that Abijah thought of.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even realize. That's, how delightful. And it worked out. It worked out remarkably well. That's people would come in, with all their any question they might have about the Earth, and I would do my best to give them an interesting and good answer about it.
Oh, it's like an Ask Me Anything.
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's fun because, of course, there's so many things you can Google, but getting to talk to someone who's in the field and can connect it to other things and, knows the local geology and so on was a great thing. There were other educators there planning K through 12 field trips and wondering where to go and, all kinds of good questions.
Yeah, that's even better than just like kids asking, is this a rock or a mineral? Like, where can we actually take the kids so that they can go meet some rocks and minerals? That's super, super cool. So the Q&A is not really a thing anymore, mostly because now that we're back in person, there's other activities that happen to be more popular. Do you have any plans for this year's EYU?
No, not yet, but I'm excited to do EYU again. It's been a little too long here, so that's and I loved doing the booths and different topics in different booths and design and staffing, and loved doing the panel. So anything would be a lot of fun. I'll have to see where there's a need.
So I kind of want to get you started. What was your favorite question that you got while you were on the panel?
Oh, gosh. There were so many good ones and so many different good ones. That was part of the fun is there were, little kids wondering about why, a volcano erupts or some kind of, basic processes of the earth sort of thing. There were specific local questions, people that were trying to describe. Do you know it? It's on Sunset when you drive here and you see, this thing and really wondering about this particular place. And so on. So it was so fun. The variety was such a delight. But I guess the one that stands out the most to me is remembering a teacher planning some activities and getting to kind of help with the design of that.
Yeah, what if we did that? So what if you were a speaker and then we had to plan a hypothetical field trip on Earth? Some kids I've always wanted to go to this country, and then some other kids I've always wanted to study volcanoes, and you're oh, well, that country actually has a volcano. You could live build field trips for people.
That could be a lot of fun. We could have Google Earth up and running, I say, is a great way to take virtual field trips. And you can just zoom to places in 3D and see the landscapes and see the rocks and so on. So
this is great. Not to sign your name onto things, but I think this virtual field trip idea for a little speaker session this year could be super, super fun.
For sure, I'd be delighted.
Anything else about EYU that you're interested in talking about?
Just that it's a great event, you know. If you're a scientist at UCLA and you haven't done it, I'd really encourage you to check it out, be a part of it in whatever way you want to, even if it's just dipping your toe in for an hour or two. And if you're in the LA area and you haven't been, I really encourage you to come. It's such good fun for, you know, children and families of all ages, and yeah, it's a truly tremendous event. I've been delighted to get to share, you know, science, some things that people have never thought about before, and even sometimes humbled by how much science some of the kids bring with them.
That's true.
Yeah, I got, well, maybe my favorite little anecdote from EYU is one year I showed up to do the rock room again, I think, but a paleontologist had to call out for some reason, and they said, hey, we've got nobody on fossils. Can you do the fossils? And I said, sure. You know, I'm not a paleontologist, but I dabble.
Who is these days?
So, exactly, right? Yeah. So, you know, I can talk to a 6-year-old about fossils and be an expert kind of on that level. But actually, you know, since it's not my true background and everything, some of these kids came in and knew a little more about some of the things. I designed this setup where people would see all of these different limbs, you know, of a dinosaur that would walk around, and then of a marine reptile, you know, like a plesiosaur kind of thing, Loch Ness Monster, right? Sort of.
Sorry, I'm going to need a definition of plesiosaur and Loch Ness Monster.
Sure, so that's, plesiosaur is one of these marine reptiles, kind of like mammals. Some mammals have gone back into the water and become like whales and dolphins and stuff.
We yearn for the water, I get it.
Yeah, some reptiles did the same thing. And so they're often lumped in with dinosaurs. They're not actually dinosaurs, but they were in the oceans at the same time. But like whales, you know, they have these kind of flipper arms because they were in the water instead of on land. And then I had a pterosaur, you know, flying reptile, also lumped in with the dinosaurs a lot of time.
Yes.
And not actually a dinosaur, but related, and they were in the skies at the same time, you know. So we had by land, by air, and by sea, you know, reptiles of the Mesozoic, and you could see those appendages. Those were wings now because they weren't walking or swimming, you know, they were flying. And I would show people that, and I remember showing this one kid, this pterosaur, and I said, oh, and do you know what this is? You know, and thinking maybe they'd go, you know, is that a pterosaur? Is that like a flying dinosaur? And the kid gave me the genus name confidently. Yeah, and I didn't even know what genus it was. I was like, well, you're probably right there. Yeah.
I love that. That used to happen to me all the time when I was teaching astrobiology, and the students who were like interested in the subject would read the news and they'd be like, did you know Europa Clipper went out today? And I'm like, no, of course not. I haven't read the news in 6 years.
Funny. It's always charming to see, isn't it, when people are, that into it.
It's very exciting. It is a little embarrassing sometimes, but I'm sure you're a little bit more used to it these days now that you're a lecturer in our department. So what is a lecturer for people who are not in academia?
Oh, sure. So a lecturer is a teacher at the college level. So, you know, most of my students don't actually realize the difference between a professor and a lecturer because if you're an undergraduate, they're both just teaching your courses. Yeah.
They're all giving you a C.
You're right. But in fact, you know, a professor somewhere like UCLA is both a research and a teaching position. So they do a lot of original research, and they supervise graduate students, and they run research labs, and they bring in grants for that and so on. And they teach classes as well. So we lecturers are entirely teaching. So I teach, you know, more classes as a result, and that's the one thing I'm doing is teaching classes and doing the things that go with it, you know, leading field trips and supervising teaching assistants and things like that.
Very cool. To me, that sounds like a dream, but I know it's not necessarily like the most stereotypical career in academia. How did you decide that you wanted to focus on teaching?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've always really liked teaching. It's mainly been the kind of work that I've done all my life. I started actually working as a tutor as a teenager, was my first job.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. And so it's been a long time, and it's always been really satisfying. But I wasn't planning on it as a career. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do for a long time. I'm always so impressed when students of mine already have a whole plan laid out, and I'm always telling the ones that don't that that's perfectly normal, because I even as I finished undergrad, I just knew I liked what I was studying. I really didn't know what I wanted to do at all. And I almost didn't even apply to grad school initially. I ended up applying to one school for a master's program because I thought, well, I really enjoyed learning from this professor. Maybe I'll do research with them. And
is that professor still around? We're friends with him?
He is. Yeah, he's retired now, but that's Ray Ingersoll, my advisor.
Oh, okay.
I had a couple of classes with him, and he was one of the best instructors that I had. And so I ended up sticking around UCLA to do a master's with him, and that was absolutely tremendous. And eventually I ended up coming back to finish my Ph.D. with him as well. So I ended up going to grad school, and I really loved it, and I really loved the research that I started doing. But maybe even more, I started TAing. And neither Ray or I had any funding. So I TA'd pretty much every quarter of grad school, just about. And
for any non-grad students who are listening, if your research is not funded, typically you have to pay for your own tuition by TAing. So if you ever feel like your TA is like begrudgingly teaching you, it might be because like their funding got pulled or something. But I promise we all love our students.
Well said, well said. And so almost immediately I was a teaching assistant, and I was running science labs. And I really took to that. And so by the end of the first quarter of doing that, I sort of knew, I think I want to do this.
Yeah. So you went from one extreme to the other. You were like, I have no idea what I want to do with my life. And then one quarter into PhD school, you're like, I'm going to be a lecturer. I got this.
Sort of, yeah. That was, there were a few more existential crises along the way.
Sure.
And I hadn't figured out, what level I wanted to teach at, or where, or whether I wanted to do the research as well, be more like a professor.
Yeah.
And so I had a whole series of other little events where I figured it out and narrowed it down. I taught at community college between the master's and the PhD, and that was another big step of, this is great. I really like this. So it took a while to sort out the details, but it really did. Starting grad school and having the research and the teaching experience really gave me an idea what I wanted to do.
I've only tried to drop out twice now, so I do understand the existential crises. But I'm starting my fourth year, so I think like 2 times of like I'm absolutely done is the right number at this point.
I think that's right. I think I hit a similar number myself, and that's perfectly normal. Yeah, that's glad you stuck it out.
Thank you. Well, everything worked out for you, and now you are teaching quite a few classes around town. So what are they?
My specialty is kind of field geology, and especially local field geology.
Touching rocks.
Touching rocks, exactly, yes. Yeah. And so I teach our intro field mapping course. So in general, geologic mapping is this really cool thing. You go out with a map, like you might use if you were like a hiker or a backpacker or something. Okay. But then you draw on it where all the different rock types are and the boundaries between them and the geometries that the different layers have, how they've been shifted or folded or faulted around by tectonic forces. And then eventually you end up coloring in each unit, as a different type of rock. So some people even joke that geology is high-risk coloring. Yeah. And so anyway, that's geologic mapping. It's my all-time favorite thing to do and teach. So I teach our intro course for that. And have since I started as a lecturer, and sometimes I'll teach some other mapping courses, intermediate. I just got back 2 days ago from our advanced capstone, field mapping course, summer field mapping course, where it's almost a month living and hiking and mapping up in the mountains.
I'm laughing because our salutatorian at graduation this year, his whole speech was about how much he hated field mapping.
Yes.
I am assuming you taught him field mapping.
Yes, that was one of my students.
I think he likes you, but
I was laughing about it. It's it's quite the experience to spend almost a month away from home and camping and trying to solve this tricky puzzle every day. And so it's quite the undertaking, and people get a lot out of it. But it can also be quite the experience. So it was funny to see him sort of joking about some of the more frustrating setbacks or confusing parts. That's part of what I think makes it so valuable, though, is that it's an actual area that you're trying to figure out with all the complexities and ambiguities and less than perfect exposure of the rock that you get in real settings. So you really learn how to be a a real geologist working on a real specific area more than you could, I think, just by, lectures or lab exercises. It's one of the reasons, actually, it's required to become a professional geologist, or a PG, which is the big certification for geologists working in industry.
I didn't realize that we had like an engineering equivalent. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
How can somebody tell when there is a fault line?
That's a great question. There's so many different ways. If you can see the old rocks themselves, you can sometimes tell by the juxtaposition that faults will slice through. Imagine again the idea of the layer cake.
Yeah.
And you have the different layers, the chocolate layer and the vanilla layer and the cherry layer or whatever. And then, if you were to slice through that and then start to lift up a piece of cake, suddenly some of the layers would run right into some of the other layers. There'd be this mismatch in the layering or in the sequence.
That would really bother my neurodivergence. If I was eating a cake and that happened to me, I would just have to put it down.
So maybe I shouldn't tell you this then, but
No,
there's actually
okay.
a delightful tradition of geologists making these geology cakes where they'll be faulted and folded. And Abijah, actually, I remember one year made a whole duplex structure, it's called.
Okay.
Is a whole fault system in cake form with all the layers shifted.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's worth Googling geology cakes if anybody feels like seeing what people get up to. But so in any case, that's a big way to see it, and especially if this fault is millions or even billions of years old, that might be all you see. It might not have moved in forever. If these are more recent or even active faults, there's so many more ways you can see them then, by the earthquakes that happen along them, by the little bit that they can creep even when there isn't an earthquake happening. With sensitive GPS instruments, we can track the slow but steady rate of movement. If one side is being lifted up, if the fault's still active, we'll see that. So a lot of the little hills that have nice, sharp, steep edges to them, that can actually be a fault scarp. In fact, just not too many blocks from here, down by Santa Monica, there's a notable little fault scarp there where this hill pops up. There's another one, there's a natural spring on one of the local K through 12 schools just down the street that's along a fault line. Faults can act as conduits for water, so many of the springs that we have in Southern California are faults. If you go to Joshua Tree, there's all these springs dotting the landscape there, and they're all along these faults, and changes in vegetation along them, and all kinds of little things like that can signal that you have a fault there.
I like this. It's a little like FAQ of how to know you live on a fault line. I like to forget how often earthquakes happen here in Los Angeles, but our past few guests have all been like earthquake people, and Abijah is coming next.
Oh, so, sure. Yep.
Yeah, so we'll get to hear about the earthquakes in China.
Yes, that's powerful stuff, and it's sure not something you want to think about too much maybe, but anyone in LA, it's worth thinking about a little, so you know what to do and have your little earthquake kit. Just a little bit of preparedness can be a lifesaver in something like that.
Very cool. I have never been on one of these field mapping geology trips before because I'm actually like pretty disabled. Like I can't really like go a night without showering. I do know that like these trips tend to be very difficult. You can't shower for like the whole time.
Well, it's funny you ask that. I think there is sort of a problem with maybe kind of like traditional or old school field geology where, if the idea is everybody should love this, because some people do, of course, then that can really be a barrier to people participating. So, I love camping myself. I go camping and backpacking, and I usually don't even pitch a tent when I'm out there. I like to be out under the stars. But, that doesn't actually correlate with, whether or not you're interested in geology or good at doing it. So we got to go out where the rocks are. There's no way around that. But we do our best to try to minimize any of those kind of barriers. So even things like at our camp just now, we had sun showers, which are actually pretty delightful. They're like tents, but way taller. And you hang a little bag. You can even leave it out in the sun while you go mapping, so it'll warm up. And when you get back, you can have a nice hot shower right there in camp, with a full privacy. And it even has the little collapsible tent poles There's even little collapsible tent pole towel racks and everything. So it's, maybe not quite the standard of tile, but that's a lot better than just being out there in the dirt for days on end. And there's lots of other stuff we try to do like that, so that isn't, any more of a hardship than it would have to be.
That's very cool. That makes me happy. I'll probably still never go camping for a number of reasons.
That's fair. If you'd ever like to join, happy to give you the pitch and show you some of the stuff you can bring to have between you and the ground. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so you just came back from Summerfield, which is this month-long trip that we've kind of been talking about. How many Summerfields have you been on?
Gosh.
So starting from when you had to go to Summerfield.
Yeah, I guess 6 or 7 or so, depending on what you count. I did it as an undergraduate, and then I TA'd it 3 years in a row with Abijah. Actually, we were co-TAs.
Very
and
cool.
And then I taught it once remotely for another school during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So that was strange, teaching field camp at home, but we did our best. And then I taught it again for that school in person 2 years later. And then I taught it this summer and last summer for UCLA, and I'll do it for us one more time next summer.
Nice. Just one more time, or that's how much you know?
One more time for now, at least. Yeah, that's then I'll be handing it off to John Huh, our new structural geologist, will be taking over field camp. Yeah.
Very cool. So you've now been teaching for 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, this is my 6th year as a lecturer.
My math is so bad.
No, it's quite all right. No, it's I've been kind of all over the place, where I was a TA, and then I was a community college instructor, and then I was a TA again, and then I was lecturing, but at different places and different times of the year. So the math is tricky, but yeah, been at it a while now, and it's been great.
So what is the biggest lesson that you've learned from teaching? At this point, you've had thousands of students. They're all going to come in with different brain chemistry and a different way that they want to learn. And I think that as we evolve as teachers, we start to change our styles based on what we see students need. So what is the biggest teaching lesson that you've learned?
That's a great question. I've learned a lot of different lessons, and some are more key than others, but they're all important. But I think maybe a kind of general thing that would encapsulate so many of them is flexibility. As you say, people are coming in with different backgrounds, with different schedules, with different interests, with different life experiences, with different goals. And so trying to design a course that can accommodate as much of that as possible, and leverage that as much as possible, and aid with those goals as much as possible, I think is really powerful. So from being flexible on kind of timing and scheduling of things to some kind of choose your own adventure style things, like in my intro course, everyone getting to pick a research project, that they delve into, and being very flexible on what that could entail, and even allowing them to connect it to other topics or majors, to all sorts of other kind of things like that. I think if you can have a little flexibility, then you can eliminate or reduce a lot of the things that could really get in the way of students engaging with the material to their full potential and getting as much out of it as they can.
You heard it here first. Grow some flexibility. Come to free yogas. It's usually Thursdays at 2:00. I've been now teaching yoga in our department for 6 or 7 months. It's been super fun. But the students are definitely becoming more flexible.
That's good. It's so important, actually, that you bring that up, because that is another lesson I learned as a teacher. I think it was my first semester and quarter as a lecturer, and that's often the hardest because you're designing the whole course, so it's maybe 2 or 3 or 4 times more work than the next time you do it. And so I was just at the desk all day, every day, except when I was in the car driving to these 2 different campuses. And I got a few months in, and I started thinking, why is my back hurting? And then I learned about stretching, thank goodness. So.
Why do I have back pain? I'm only 30. So do you have any favorite examples of when students got to choose their own adventure?
Yeah, there's a few that really stand out to me, and some are when students find a topic that's a geology topic, but is actually deeply connected to their own lives in some way.
Mm-hmm.
I remember in one case, I had a student who was so keen to do a report on this particular volcano that's by the village in Mexico that her family was from. And then she was worried, though, of, can I use this source if it's in Spanish? And and I can't speak it myself. And I said, as long as you can read it, this is the Mexican Geological Survey. Like, this is a very legit source. And so she was so excited to do that, and I think to show her family afterwards. I had another student that actually experienced the Tohoku earthquake in 2011.
Where is that?
Personally, that was a devastating earthquake in Japan. And it caused the tsunami that caused the Fukushima nuclear disaster.
One.
Yeah. And so they had actually experienced that living in Japan at the time.
Yeah.
And so a similar thing, they brought up these primary sources in Japanese, and were able to then put together this whole report on that had this, this personal firsthand component to it as well that was really compelling. And there's so many instances of that, people tying something into where they're from, or what other major they're studying, or a family connection, or whatever. That's really fantastic to see.
So there's a rumor that lecturers don't really get a whole lot of training on how to be a good teacher. I know as a TA, we had very minimal training on how to be a good teacher. So you were very accepting of these other sources from other languages, but were you ever trained on how to be accepting of academic papers from other languages?
That's a good question. Yeah, we don't have a formal training course the way the TAs do.
Oh, that's funny.
You just kind of start. I guess it's when I applied to the job, I had all this teaching experience.
Yeah.
So I guess, they look for some experience and all of that. But otherwise, you learn as you go. UCLA has a lot of great resources for that, actually. And so we have these whole centers on campus that support teaching. And they do all kinds of things, including running these workshops. So they're not required, but I've gone to a bunch of trainings. I actually started even when I was still finishing my Ph.D. and I was a TA, but I knew by that point, I was going the teaching route. And they were kind enough to let me go to this one that was mostly new faculty. And I've gone to a few since, and different topics, but all really helpful. The first one I went to really shaped how I did all my course design, things about active learning and explicit goals, content goals that the students should be thinking about, and so on. And then I've been to others, that have field-specific things, everything from, how to drive off-road to, first aid training or the like. And as far as, you mentioned being aware of and accepting of different backgrounds, I went to, during the pandemic, a workshop that talked a lot about diverse backgrounds in science. And so that was really helpful and kind of eye-opening for me. It's actually kind of a funny story. It's maybe a little embarrassing, but you don't know what you
it's okay.
What you don't know
I
until
embarrass
you learn.
myself on every episode of the podcast.
All right, very good. Well, I'll tell you this story. It was quite a little learning experience for me. I went to this workshop to talk about how to better support students of all backgrounds in academia. And we talked some, and then they said, all right, we're gonna split up into these working groups, and they put us in the little Zoom rooms together.
Oh, the breakout rooms.
The breakout rooms.
I miss breakout rooms.
Yes.
They were so camp.
So yeah, and so there I was in this breakout room, and I think some people have this kind of notion that the idea of supporting everybody in science means some people are to blame or the problem or something, and which I've seen just really isn't the case. But I think I was laboring under that sort of delusion just a little subconsciously. I went into this breakout room, and it was all these diverse academics.
Yeah.
And
you.
And me, yeah, right, and little old,
And you're like, oh my God, the white guilt of it all.
Straight white male,
Yeah.
right? And so I've had a very privileged background, and it was me, and there was one other person in there who I thought, okay, and they have the same background. I thought, well, all right, at least it's not. just me.
Yeah.
And we're going around and hearing these stories about, as a woman of color in STEM, or, as all these different experiences and all these really, such tragic and unnecessary, barriers and impediments and biases that people encountered. And it got around to the other white guy there first, and I thought, okay, well, he can sort of kick it off for us. And he began, as a homosexual man in academia, and I kind of thought to myself, oh no, like I'm the representative. And it got to me. It was my turn to share my background. I didn't really have much to say. I just said, well, I'm actually just not from any disadvantaged group. I'm, the white and straight and grew up middle class and, all of that. And I think, like I say, that is silly, but I was like a little worried that would be bad somehow. And everybody, I think the first person who said something said like, oh, well, that's so wonderful that like you came here, that you care enough about this to come here, even if it doesn't affect you personally. And I thought like, oh yeah, of course, like how stupid of me. And then we had this great conversation. So that was an impactful experience. It really kind of shaped this idea. I think, when people kind of politicize some stuff, it's easy to think that there's a lot of like animosity out there or whatever. And that really helped show me that actually, we're all on the same team here and just trying to do good science and do right by everyone in our community. And so I'm really glad that I had that experience. And, I hope anybody else in a similar boat gets to have a similar experience to see, see what we're actually about at somewhere like UCLA.
That's very special, and I think it's funny because you walking into this room and you're like, shoot, I'm the only straight white man, is how like people like me often feel when you walk into a room and everyone else is a straight white man.
As I was thinking, I thought that back in reverse of like how silly of me to but exactly, a good experience and a good perspective to come to. So
well, thank you for sharing that. I promise it is not embarrassing.
Thank you.
So our last question for everybody, and I actually forgot to warn you, I normally warn our guests, it's if you were a child at EYU, so either like back at the Rocks booth or maybe on Zoom with you, what would you have wanted to hear from an adult?
Well, I think when I was a bit older of a kid and I really got into science, it was about 10 or 11, I really went the science route. What appealed to me most was that there are these compelling explanations for all the things we see in the world around us, these fascinating stories and these really tested, tried and true, explanations for them, that you can really understand why all the things you see are the way they are. So I think maybe trying to give little me a little jump start on that and saying, hey, everything you see around you, there's a fascinating story, there's a fascinating explanation, and check it out.
Yeah, in this big world of unknowns, when you don't know what your career is going to look like when you just stepped into college, at least you can know some concrete explanations for why certain things are happening around you. That's very nice. Where can people keep up with you? Either your teaching or, I don't know, geology.
Teaching route. And they were kind enough. I don't really have social media, but...
That's very healthy of you.
Thank you. You can keep up with me by taking my classes, or dropping by my office, or sending me an email anytime.
Very cool. Thank you so much for joining us, DJ Snowball Garnet. I will not be offended when you don't share the flyer for this episode to your Instagram story.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
And with that, never stop exploring.